So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Understanding Your Carbon Footprint for Beginners. Thank you so much for joining us today. So, this webinar is designed for business leaders like you or managers of companies of all sizes interested in gaining insights in their carbon footprint, but also contributing towards a more sustainable future. So before I dive into the agenda, I would like to shortly introduce myself. So my name is Wienke Schouwink. I'm the Environmental Solutions Manager at DGB Group. And I have a background in global business and sustainability and over 5 years of working experience in the field of carbon footprinting, compensations, and helping companies reach their sustainability goals. So I work for DGB Group, and DGB is a purpose-driven organization. And we specialize in comprehensive carbon footprint calculations, but as well, we are a project developer of large-scale nature restoration projects for carbon compensation. So all in all, we assist organizations to achieve their sustainability goals by addressing their carbon footprint. So let's go to the agenda. Because now that we are several weeks in 2024, companies start to reflect on 2023. They start to set financial and sustainability targets. They are looking on how can we do better coming years? How can we improve? So in this current global landscape, it's undeniable. Sustainability is a must for every company. And if you are joining this webinar today with me, you recognize this importance as well. So the first step in becoming sustainable and reducing your environmental impact is, of course, understanding and measuring your carbon footprint today. And I will explain you how you can do this. So we start with the basics. So the first point on the agenda is, what is a carbon footprint? And also, what are your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions? We will also shortly discuss the relevance of a carbon footprint calculations and the CSRD. And then, of course, we will dive into the 7 steps that you need to take as a company to calculate your carbon footprint. And I will also include examples of our online CO2 expert tool. And of course, finally, we will have room for some of your questions. So feel free, if you have any questions during the webinar, to send a WhatsApp to the number below. I've added it on the slides. Okay, so let's start with the basics. What is a carbon footprint? A carbon footprint is the total amount of carbon emissions that your company generates or your company is responsible for. And there are many different sources of carbon emissions from a business and its activities. So therefore, to make it easier to manage them, they are divided into 3 different scopes. Scope 1, 2, and 3. So let's have a look into the 3 different scopes. So scope 1 are all your direct emissions that arise from activities that are owned or controlled by your company. So this is actually everything related to gas consumption. For example, your fuel consumption of the trucks that you own, or for example, the gas consumption in your office. So that is scope 1 with gas. Scope 2 are the indirect emissions that arise from the purchased energy sources like electricity, heating, or cooling. So think of your electricity use in your factory or the electricity use in your office. So scope 2 is everything related with your energy consumption. And scope 3 is the broadest category of emissions. And this includes all your indirect emissions from the whole entire value chain of the business. So every activity that you are responsible for with your partners. So your partner can be your supplier or, for example, your customer. And this scope 3, really goes beyond your own operations. For example, the transportation of your goods is carried out by a transportation company. So this is your partner, and then transportation emissions fall under your scope 3 emissions. So these were the basics, understanding what is a carbon footprint and your different 3 scopes. But why is it important that we calculate the carbon footprint for an impactful CO2 strategy? So by measuring and assessing your footprint and your carbon emissions, we gain insights in your direct but also in your indirect carbon emissions resulting from your business activities. So this data is actually very crucial to set targets to reduce your environmental impact, but also to comply with upcoming or already regulations, but also improve resource and operational efficiency, because your footprint is in the end a key environmental indicator. So monitoring but also reducing your carbon footprint contributes to environmental responsibility. And this will positively, of course, affect your business reputation, but it will also align with the expectations of your customers and your investors, for example, for sustainability. So it will position your company for long-term sustainability and resilience. So all in all, every company, small, large, need to start assessing their carbon footprint because it's just the start of any sustainability strategy. And I talked already a bit about comply with regulations, because the CSRD is there. It's a corporate sustainability reporting directive, and this mandates large European corporations to report on their sustainability practices, including, of course, their carbon emissions. And it really aims to address the ESG factors in corporate decision making, but also for transparency, of course. So from this year onwards, actually, from January 2024, the CSRD will progressively apply to more than 45,000 companies in Europe. So that's quite a lot. And even though this does not yet apply to small and medium-sized companies, these large corporations that are required to report can also require their suppliers to do so. So therefore, smaller companies will eventually also need to measure their carbon footprint and report on it. So before I dive into the 7 steps, this is our CO2 expert tool. And we have developed this tool where you can easily calculate your carbon footprint. You can easily add data, add locations, and compare and benchmark the different carbon footprints over the years or between locations. So I will go over the 7 steps of a carbon footprint, and I will use the CO2 expert tool as an example for every step. So these are the 7 steps of a carbon footprint. So the first step is to define the parts of your organization that are interested and that you need to include in your carbon footprint. The second step is to collect data. The third step is to calculate your footprint. The fourth step is to validate your carbon footprint. The fifth step is to compensate for your footprint, receive insights, and of course share your progress and the impact that you make. So I will go over every step, and I will also include examples of our CO2 expert tool with you. So let's go to the first step. So the first step is really to define the parts of your organization that you need to collect data on. So which emission categories of those scope 1, 2, and 3 do you need to include, and for which locations? So we will choose the scopes over which you have the most influence on, and also for which you have data available. So at least we would like to include scope 1 and 2 as a minimum, because scope 3 can be a bit more difficult to measure and might take more time because it's with your partners. So you need to partner up. So it's crucial, of course, that you consult with us on your scope and which scope 3 emissions you want to apply or you need to apply for your organization. So let's take an example. if your company produces a lot of waste, or if you transport a lot of products by air, we will include these energy scopes that apply to your organization. So I'm now going to share my screen with you for the tool, and you will see what I'm going to add. So the first step is to add a location. So Amsterdam, and I insert the amount of employees, 100, and then I want to measure my footprint, and I will do that over 2023 annually, and I add the different scopes I would like to include in my carbon footprint calculation. Scope 3, I will include air travel. Okay, and next, no, we don't need help. Okay, so this is how we are adding the different scopes in the tool. So once you have chosen which activities we are responsible for and also which emission scopes we need to include, we can start to collect data. And we will input this data together with supporting documentation in the tool, like fuel cards and energy and gas bills. So I will share again my screen, and we need to start a measurement. So let's do that. And if we have started a measurement, we can calculate the different scopes. So for diesel, I will add the data. I have used 10,000 liters of diesel. And here I can choose to add supporting documents, and I will save it. So then I also have electricity. I purchased green electricity, wind power, and I insert the data. And you see wind power has 0 carbon emissions, and I will save it. So in this part, you also see the different emission factors that apply to the different energy sources. So we convert each of your emission scopes with the relevant emission factor. So this is how to collect and insert the data. And now that all the data is filled in, our tool will automatically calculate your carbon footprint across the 3 different scopes. So scope 1, 2, and 3. And it's normal practice actually to calculate your carbon footprint over a year, so on an annual basis. And now we are in February 2024, so we will start calculating for 2023. But of course, you may wish to align your carbon footprinting reporting with the accounting period to support your reporting progress. So how are we going to find the calculations in the tool? So let's share my screen again. And we go to report, and here you find an overview of your scope 1, 2, and 3 carbon emissions. And you can compare this to other years. So for example, over here you see that 2024 is still 0. So great, we have now finally calculated your carbon footprint. And the 4th step is to validate your carbon footprint, to receive a validated carbon footprint report. So what are the steps? We set up a call, and we will check all your data that you filled in. And we will also check all the sources of evidence, so all the supporting documents that you added. And then we will create a validated carbon footprint report according to the latest GHG protocol. So this report will show your business carbon emissions. And you can of course use this report to develop your business CO2 strategy and to gain insights in your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. But it's important to understand and to know that not all your emissions can be avoided or reduced. Especially not for past emissions like those of 2023, because they are already emitted into the atmosphere. So for those past emissions or for irreducible carbon emissions, we can use carbon units. And a carbon unit is also known as carbon credits. And you can use them to compensate for your irreducible footprint to reach your sustainability goals. So step 5 includes compensating for your irreducible emissions and take responsibility for your carbon footprint, where one carbon unit represents 1 ton of CO2 that we remove from the atmosphere through our nature and biodiversity projects. So DGB is a project developer of carbon compensation projects, and you can address your irreducible emissions directly with us. So for example, your carbon footprint of 2023. And this will also, of course, help to restore nature, improve biodiversity, empower local communities. So all in all, it's a win-win for your business and, of course, for nature. So that is step 5. We go to step 6. And now that you know your carbon footprint and that you know that you can compensate for your past emissions, it's time to identify the different improvements and also set targets. And this is all based on your carbon footprint report. So you can use this data to identify the best actions to reduce your emissions and also to benefit from cost savings. So let's take an example. We have electricity use, and electricity use is by far the biggest contributor to your carbon footprint. So you can prioritize measures that reduce your electricity use, or you can consider the option of solar panels or other green energy solutions or alternatives. So you can use this very first carbon footprint as a baseline to set targets for your sustainability goals in the future. And of course, DGB is always here to help you with that. And our experts will help you to assess your results, but also to improve your insights. And we will help you to develop a full CO2 strategy, but of course, in line with your own organizational objectives. So we assist you in the whole transitioning towards a more decarbonized value chain by helping you with the energy savings, carbon compensation, but also the whole reduction strategy. And of course, then we have step 7. And now that we have calculated the carbon footprint, we have compensated the carbon footprint, we have set reduction targets, we can share our findings and impact with our stakeholders. So sharing your progress to stakeholders as customers, investors, but also your employees is a great opportunity to demonstrate your commitment to sustainability and also the impact that you have made. So on this slide, you see an example of our CO2 footprint report, as well as an example of your impact report that you receive after carbon compensation. So these were the 7 steps of a carbon footprint calculation and the steps that you need to take to make that positive environmental impact. So to start your journey towards sustainability, if you're a big company or a small company, you only need to take the first step, and that is measuring your carbon footprint. And of course, we are here to help you. So this was the webinar, and thank you so much for listening to me. But of course, we still have a lot of questions. So I already received those questions in the meantime via WhatsApp. But I will pick just 4. So let me have a look which one I want to choose. So let's start with this one. What if you don't have data available? That's a very good question, actually, because we always work with the most specific data available. So let's take as an example again the diesel consumption. So we will prioritize to use liters of diesel consumed. But if this data is not available, we can also use the spend-based method, where we look at how much money is spent on the diesel. And if this is also not available, of course, we can always work with averages. So we can always make it work. Then the second question I selected is the calculation recognized worldwide? Yes, the calculation that we run are based on the GHG protocol, but also on ISO standards. And you can use this calculation indeed worldwide. Also a good question. So the third question is about the carbon credits, the carbon units. So where do I buy the carbon credits to offset my footprint? Well, that you can do that in our tool. So the CO2 expert tool has a specific section where you can select the carbon compensation projects that you want to use for offsetting your carbon footprint. But of course, you can also just give me a call or send me an email, and I will explain you all about our projects, and we will select the best projects for your carbon footprint. So both ways, via the tool or just via me. You can always give me a call also if you just have a small question. And then I have one more question, and this is: my company is based in the UK. Can I also use this calculator? Of course. So we definitely designed this calculator to use everywhere in the world. So if you are filling in the location, so I did, for example, Amsterdam, you can also fill in London, so you're in the UK. Then all the emission factors that apply will automatically convert to the emission factors of the UK. So yes, you can also use the calculator and get a validated carbon footprint with DGB. Okay, well, these were the questions. I see that there are a lot of more questions, but we will reply to you via WhatsApp or give me a call or an email, and we will be in touch. Thank you so much for joining today. And if you want to restore nature and want to have a validated carbon footprint, let me know. Okay, see you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.